So what was it like growing up with two gay parents?
Technically, it was three because I had two moms and a dad. Growing up with my mom before I even knew I had a dad, I didn't know it was different because when I went to school as a kindergartner, I had known nothing but having two moms. So at that point, a friend of mine brought in for kindergarten show and tell his dad. And I was like, what is this thing called a dad? It is awesome. I went home and I asked my two moms, what is a dad? And they kind of got a little nervous, ran in the back room, came back out and said, are you happy with two moms? Are you okay? I said, well, yeah, I'm okay with two moms. But I also want this cool thing called the dad. And so at the beginning, I didn't know this was any different. So it was great. It was, I had a lot of nurturing. It was wonderful. But then when people begin to notice at school, that my mom is different, that's when bullying happens. In society, there's always questions. There's, where's your dad at? And a lot of people just didn't take it well in that time. There were not the supports that we have in school today. And my mom faced a lot of discrimination, which even though sometimes I didn't face it directly, I could see her stress. I could see that when I got called into the principal's office for acting up or doing anything wrong, they didn't blame it on my behavior or any traumas I might be experiencing or what I've gone through. They automatically went to it must be because your parents are gay. It must be because your mother's gay. And then later on, I found a huge difference in how it was received between a woman, being my mother's, or my dad. My dad was looked at as kind of different, where everybody was like, it was cool to have two moms in high school, but then not cool to have a gay dad. So there were different stigmas that came with it. But the whole way through, it was always a battle against bullying and people not wanting to really ask questions and making assumptions. And it put me in a lot of places where I was uncomfortable. And, it was difficult because in those times it was just not something that was at all seen as normal.
Describe, if you could, how it was like to lose three parents in 6 months and how
Um,
that affected your worldview.
for me, it was like, for my dad, I knew he was going to pass. He had HIV/AIDS. I knew this was coming. I had a lead up to it. Me and him had conversations. And as he got sicker and sicker, it was difficult. But in Seattle, where he was living, I had a support system. And the gay community out there was amazing and was much more like embracive, and it was a different place in the 90s in Seattle than it was in Detroit. So for me, that was a little bit easier because I knew that was coming. And then 6 months later, returning to Michigan, and then the shock of losing my mother's, and then also realizing that like this didn't happen over a fence line. This didn't happen randomly. This happened because this man hated LGBTQ people. Um, and that combined into a worldview that really hated mainstream society. Because in Seattle, I had watched my dad have to fundraise and do different things and pretend to be straight to work at Boeing and not get the health care he needed, nor the money for AZT for the AIDS treatments because of where he was working. That told me society didn't like him, us as a family. Then moving to Michigan, I heard that, I learned that this man did this because he said God made him do it. And that made me really feel that society hated us as a family.
How did you end up in prison just 3 years after losing your parents?
Um, it was really a hurt people type thing. If society hated my dad, if this man wanted to kill my mothers because they were different, being a part of gang culture came very easy. It gave me a family. It also gave me an outlet for my hatred towards society. It gave me hurt people hurt people. So it gave me the outlet of pouring my pain back onto a community that I thought hated me anyways. So I always felt justified. And getting involved with gangs, that became my only family. Therefore, I was willing to do anything for them. So when there was a drive-by shooting that sadly killed a little girl outside of an apartment in Southwest Detroit, I didn't pull the trigger. I wasn't there. But I participated. I got rid of the gun. I helped before and after the crime. And under Michigan law, I am guilty. So I basically went to trial realizing the moment that they told me this had happened that I had passed the same pain that I felt on to another family. So I completed the cycle of violence. So I hated myself for that. So I just walked through the trial process and let myself die. My lawyer kept telling me, why don't you take a plea deal? Why don't you do something to save yourself? But I had no family. My gang family had turned on me and began testifying on me. I had nothing. So I just wanted to die. So I just kind of let it go. They offered me 10 to 15 years as a plea deal. I didn't take it because to me, I felt like I deserved to go into prison and die. And it took me a lot of years to kind of grow and deal with my traumas to snap out of that mindset.
And how did you overcome so much loss and loss of your own freedom?
For me, there was many years inside where I wanted to that was my reality, that was my life. In Michigan, life without parole means you will die in prison. So I had to adjust to my new lifestyle. I stayed with gang involvement while I was incarcerated. And then at one point, I got a bunch of letters from a church called Renaissance Unity that you had put together. And all those letters said that I was worth a second chance. I was worth being redeemed. So it kind of blew me away, and that came on my birthday, shortly after we had first met. And that made me realize that maybe I do as a human being have value. And at that point, I began educating myself inside. I got 3 college degrees. Education changes your perception on things. When I wrote my first book about my life story, that was my therapy. I was able to get my life out and kind of puke it onto the pages and cry and deal with some of my traumas. But as you know, that was probably 12 to 15 years before I even got released. And my release only really came because we put an organization together, built it up, and lobbied and got some of these judges changed where 18-year-olds could have a second chance. So for me, those letters were a catalyst for me not to lose hope in myself and to realize that if other people could see a future in me, I could begin to see a future in myself. And education was the second major part of that, to, in a way, let myself earn my way out of prison. I had to feel that I could have skills to be worthy of society and have skills that society could be useful for. And that's also why what saved my humanity was I did not want the only legacy I had, Chris and Sue and Joseph Creed and my dad, like the legacy of them to be Josh Puckett, drive-by shooting, life without parole. So I wanted something different for that legacy. And that's why I wrote my gang intervention program and my civic engagement training book and began teaching classes inside, because even if I couldn't be free, if I changed the life of someone in there who was going to society, at least I was giving back in some way. And I truly believe, a friend of mine, Richard Strong, once told me that you basically grow as a person in a place, and when you grow too big for that, it will birth you out of it. And I used to look at him like I was crazy. He would tell me, like, you're getting too big for this, you're educated, you're doing all these great things, this system is going to spit you out. And in the end, it really did spit me out and give me a new chance and put me out here in freedom, which is amazing and has been a blessing. And as of a couple days ago on July 17th, it's been my first year out of prison after 29 years.
So both your moms own the house that the original Affirmations building was in. So around that time, I don't know how old you were, but tell us about what it was like growing up with your mom and Sue and around that time.
It was pretty cool. It was a vibrant community, and that's something that is really a wonderful place in my heart, because everybody was really supportive. I was like the kid of the gay community, so there was like everyone kind of loved on me. But my mom and Sue had been allowing people to stay at the house that had either been abused. I remember at one point a woman had actually been raped by a man. She was a lesbian woman, and they had took her in, and they kind of realized, like, we need a house, we need a place where people can go, like a community center. And it really started as a first call center for people that were dealing with trauma. It was one of the houses we had fixed up. They were renting houses all over Detroit. We would usually move into them and fix them up, but this was one where they really turned it into a community center, and there were people there, and there was activity in all the rooms. It was always a vibrant place, and I just remember kind of running around, and it didn't matter who was there. Like, somebody would pick me up. I was probably maybe 9 or 10, I think, and it was a place that was really like filled with love and almost an anticipation in the air of community and coming together. And I think in a way that shaped, even today, I have a view of communal living, and the way community looks is kind of taken from those moments where, there would be somebody sleeping in one of the bedrooms over here who didn't have a place to stay because their family had kicked them out. And it was also very much, I learned about chosen family, and that we create community and we create family wherever we are. And it doesn't always have to be your blood family that is, your real family. We were creating family in those days, and we were creating something that blew me away years later when you actually came and told me how sustainable it had become. And just, last year being able to get out and go to the big Affirmations Community Center and realize that it started from that small house, is amazing. And to know that they had that impact, and to know that, in a sense, their murders weren't for nothing, that it was a catalyst to help the community grow, is a great point of pride for myself.
Do you want to talk about the time that you went to the bars before they opened?
Oh yeah, and as a kid, in a way, whether it was proper or not, I kind of had to grow up fast. Like was treated like a little adult. So we would go to Gigi's. We would go to a bar called Tubes that with my mom. That was some of the earlier like hidden the Red Door Bar in the community. These were like, you would go this way, go that way, and you'd come into this vibrant, wonderful place where everybody was dancing and having a great time because these were kind of hidden back then. So it was an adventure kind of as a little kid. But it was pretty fun, but it was also like, again, an extension of that community. It was like Chris and Sue, my mom and her wife, were really like cavaliers of that time of being out and not letting anyone care. Even when they decided to get married, they simply said, we don't care what the laws say, we don't care whatever, we're going to rent this church out, we're going to have a pastor, we're going to get married, and we're going to do it, and we don't care what anybody says. We're going to do what we want to do because love justifies everything. And that, to me, is one of the things that characterizes, my childhood, is the fact that my advocacy, even now when I work in criminal justice reform and housing and everything else, comes from a place where they were advocates, and seeing that as a young age, and seeing, how individuals can really make a difference in community and can really like be the change that they want to see. That's kind of what infuses me for what I do today.
So what is your take on hate crimes in the past and the way they are now?
Yeah. For me, I think that we're growing up the way I grew up, where I was really surrounded by a community of people that loved each other, that showed a lot of love, and then seeing that people would harm others because they love differently is really disgusting to me. And back then, my mom's story was kind of big in the community, and probably today it would, on a national scale, be something that would be, on the news across the nation. But also, too, there's so many stories that even now we've become accustomed to hearing about violence against the LGBTQ community that I think we've almost digressed a little bit now today. And I can say, coming out of prison after 29 years, I'm honestly disgusted with the society that we live in now. I'm disgusted at how much we hate each other, how much there's division, how much we, judge and push people apart. And I really think that we need to refocus and realize that, how people love is not cause for violence. And as someone who committed violence against other families and like caused harm in the community, those things don't leave you easily. And I think that we're going down a really dangerous road even today as we utilize hate and separation and tribalism to drive people apart. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing a rise in more hate crimes and more, as you had said at Pride, we had a gay bashing this year, which is, disgusting and we shouldn't be there as a society today. I would have hoped that after all these years that we would have grown and been better. And I really feel like, as the guy who came out of prison for taking a life, like, I expected better out of society. And on some days, I'm really, really discouraged at the way that we treat each other today.
How does a film like this refocus your viewpoints?
I think it really refocuses on a national level, and that bringing this film back up and really like reminding people of where it can go. Because James Brooks was not just the man who killed my mother. James Brooks was not just a next door neighbor. He was a man who was hurting. He was a man who was disenfranchised from society. I had to, in a way, forgive him to forgive myself, to create a space that would allow me to heal so that I could be ready to come back to society. We have so many people now that hopefully a film like this coming back up, will open their minds to realize that their own hate, their own frustration at society and what's going on only perpetuates things. And if we can refocus on meeting in the middle, and we can refocus on realizing that people's differences is what makes society such a wonderful place, and that begin to accept that from both sides, accept that somebody on the right has their views and that's fine, and they can be okay, but they have to not push that onto somebody on the left or somebody in the middle, and that we're all humans. And that's the biggest thing I think people forget, is that our politics don't take away our humanity. And right now we're using politics to disenfranchise and dehumanize others, which only opens things up for violence. When we were involved with gangs, I was on the blue team. I don't even like to give credence to what the name of the gang was. They were the red team. So the red team was bad. We dehumanized them the same way we do in politics, which allowed us to do violence. These are the same things that are happening in today's society. It's just gangbanging on a larger scale. And hopefully a film like this and refocusing will realize that when the outcome is taking lives, you have to really take a step back and realize that your own tweets, views, posts can motivate people to do horrible things. This man felt so disenfranchised with society that he felt the only way that he could get his anger and rage out was to kill my parents. I worry that we have a ton of people sitting out there right now that are powder kegs just ready to explode. And by creating dialogue and actually having conversation, maybe we can heal some of that pain.
So as far as your childhood goes, and being raised by a gay mother and a gay father alternatively, and what would you suggest to a kid who is being raised by gay parents and being bullied at school?
Yeah. The biggest thing is it's real easy to fight hate with hate. Like, it's really easy to be mad at your situation and push back with violence, or push back with, fight fire with fire. And in a way, I was bullied. And then in my late teen years, I became the bully. So we have to be really careful on looking at our traumas and looking at the traumas that we could cause if we respond in a hateful or angry manner. So for me, to a kid having to go through that right now and deal with that, is really to find solace in the love of your family and who your people are and who your support system is, and make sure that they're expressing these frustrations to their parent, to the teachers, to the people who are there to support you, and not internalizing it. For me, I didn't let any of it go. I internalized it. I bottled it up, and then I would explode at school. And a lot of times, especially back then, they didn't even know why. Why is Joshua acting up? It's because I had pushed all that inside and pushed it down and didn't deal with it. Luckily today, in many schools and in many communities, we have more inclusive teachers and faculty, and it's important for a youth to use what's there, and also to report what's going on, and to have mediation in the schools, and to have a place where you can have the bully and the person being bullied sit down and have a conversation and a dialogue about what's going on. Because I can also say on the other side, the person doing the bullying has most likely experienced some trauma as well. Because before I was, became the bully, I was bullied. Before I hurt others, I was hurt. So I think we as a society and as educators and individuals that are there to care for our youth, first, the young person needs to report it and use the system, but the system also needs to back them up and create situations where we're talking about this and we're creating peaceful dialogue so that individuals can interact and we can look into what traumas are in all the families involved.
Do you want to talk about your growing up with Brooks and about the canoe ride or anything like that?
Yeah. This wasn't James Brooks, who killed my parents, was not a random man who I didn't know next door. Coming into that community, and this is the juxtaposition that's very odd to many people. Most of my life, I moved into houses in Detroit. We fixed them up. We moved on to the next one. There was a time when I was on the east side when a little black boy came running up to me and grabbed my hair because he had never seen a redhead in that neighborhood. There was never been a white person in that neighborhood in those times. I felt completely safe in those neighborhoods. And then when we got money and had time, we moved to Sue's ancestral home in the suburbs, in this place that's stereotypically safe. This is where this happens. This is where violence occurs. So for me, that was always different. I felt safe in Detroit. I felt accepted. I felt community there. And then I went to this other place, and my mom tried to create that. She sent me over to his house to pick up the sticks in his lawn. She sent me fishing with him. She thought I needed, kind of a male figure in my life at the time because my father was so far away in Seattle. I went canoeing with him and did these things with him like he was an uncle. And that became a real pain when I realized this man just took my mothers from me because of how they loved. You didn't love or care about me enough, even though I was trying to have this interaction with you, and my moms were trying to give him this interaction because he was an old man who lived alone next door. So it was also very instrumental in my worldview that this place that we all said the suburbs are safe, we're out in the country, was not safe. And every time I was in a new house in Detroit or in a new place, I was comfortable there. Community was good. People accepted me. They accepted my mothers. So it was difficult as a kid to realize that this person that I thought of as like an uncle would kind of just do this and then have the nerve to say because God told them to, or this was a religious thing because of how they loved. We should never be at a place in our lives where we're wanting to harm other people because of how they choose to love. So it was rough.